I haven't played WoW since the beginning of Dragonflight, but I do keep up with WoW content creators and stay curious enough to kind of stay in the loop on the game. I'll watch all the new cutscenes and hear people talk about the plot and gameplay features. Lately, I've heard a lot of talk about the narrative of the game having the wrong tone, or not focusing on what makes Warcraft Warcraft. I'm not saying these people are wrong, but I don't think that's the main problem with the story of WoW. You see, I'm also currently writing a fantasy novel, and while doing so, I've listened to plenty of lectures on writing. One of my favorites is Brandon Sanderson's lecture on plotting. He describes his outlining strategy as promise, progress, and payoff. What are the promises he's making to his audience about the plot or the character? What kind of progress can we experience toward fulfilling that promise? And what's the payoff? Was the payoff worth it? I think the main problem with WoW's story is messing up one or more of these things. First, let's talk about what I think is a pretty good story for WoW standards. Wrath of the Lich King. The cinematic plays, probably my favorite WoW cinematic if I had to choose, showing the Lich King with the voiceover from his father, and the promise made is clear. We are going to Northrend to fight the Lich King. The story then progresses as we make landfall in Northrend and fight our way through the zones, getting closer and closer to Icecrown Citadel, which feels good as we're literally getting closer and closer to our goal. Then, some random stuff happens. We get sidetracked in Ulduar, which is amazing by the way, but it's definitely a side quest. And then we have a jousting tournament right outside the Lich King's house while we're at war. Okay. And then we storm the Citadel and kill the Lich King in what I would say is one of the best payoffs in WoW history. The payoff being a really epic fight in which we literally all get killed, then resurrected by the spirit of Arthas' father, and finish off the Lich King while he's being held back by all the souls he's stolen into Frostmourne. The progress may have been a little weird with Ulduar in the tournament, but other than that, the story of Wrath has a solid promise, progress, and payoff for the players. On its face, this is the basic recipe for most WoW expansions, and it's just fine. Now, let's talk about BFA. The promise. The Horde and Alliance are at war, and well, that's not exactly new, even though we work together all the time in raids. So I guess the promise is we're still at war. Then we progress by recruiting allies and collecting Azerite into the payoff of tentacles. Lots of tentacles. How did we get here? Like, I played all throughout BFA, and looking back, it's just a whirlwind of nonsense. Like, seriously, they had this wonderful story going with the princess and Bwamsamdi. Do you know how that story ended? I do, because I read the book that came out afterward, and they just became friends at the end. The most interesting character in the whole expansion, and he's an afterthought and content that's not even in the game. I need to stop, I'm getting worked up. The promise of BFA was ambiguous. The progress went in weird directions, and the payoff was a big laser into a giant octopus. It's a mess. And if we ask the same questions on even newer expansions, there's the same lack of clarity of what they're trying to even do. Ask yourself, what are the promises, progress, and payoffs for Dragonflight? If we watch the cinematic, the promise is there's gonna be dragons? Playing the game introduces the bad dragons that we know we're gonna fight, and as we progress, we get involved in the societal politics of local centaurs. Oy. The expansion's not over yet, So, we're not sure what the final payoff will be, but if past expansions are any clue, I'd say the payoff won't be a payoff at all, and they'll just lead us off into another vague warning like the jailer did. My point in this video is that the story of WoW simply lacks structure. It doesn't have to be complicated or thought-provoking, it just needs to take a note out of Sanderson's book and make us promises. Show us how we're progressing toward fulfilling those promises, and then have a satisfying payoff at the conclusion. Don't just make another promise, actually give us a conclusion. I hope this helped clear that up. What are your thoughts?